What up? Marsh Pod coming to you. The last day of January. Let me be cliche. How is it already almost February? Okay, got it out of the way. As the last little remnants of our exciting off-season slowly makes its way to a close, obviously we've got a lot of highlights coming out at this point. There's occasional cuts and signings, right? Best Coast Ballers signed Sky Buckner-Williams. The battle for the real Sky is officially on. But also officially on is the introduction to what I would call the off-season. And this is now the off-season. Well, hold on. It's not that I'm the only one that would call it the off-season, but this is like now the off-season. And so what it's not, though, however, is the almost beginning of SimWorld college hoops. And you've got an opportunity now to be introduced to some players. So for those of you that are new to the understanding of SimWorld, we had obviously Ground Zero season last year. This is not, right? This is season 1. This is not the first ever, right? So let's get that out of the way. And of course, there was incredible talents that went from SimWorld Hoops on to the next level. Some of them went straight to the G League. Guys like Shea King went straight to the G League. Cody Johnson went straight to the G League. Really high-level Jai Edge went from New York to G League. These are really talented players, but we're not going to see them in college. Who we are going to see, there's a handful of them. And we are now starting the training camp of college hoops, and some of these guys are going to be showing up in the news feeds in the not so distant future. So I wanted to do a quick top 9 of the players that we need to watch out for, and by extension the teams that we need to watch out for as SimWorld College Hoops gets underway. We'll go based off team because I think the player is going to be, the number one player is going to be obvious, but we're going to work the teams to watch and kind of, there's 4 or 5 that are going to kind of trickle down. First team up is going to be UCLA. They're going to bring in Jalen Snow. They're adding Legero Carroll. And we're going to focus on, in this podcast, we're going to focus on our SimWorld Hoops players or alumni. And as we cover this season, what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot more of those guys. And we're going to do our best to keep everybody up to speed. But that's what we're going to focus on. So you can look around the country and you could say, oh yeah, well, Scoot Henderson's in G League. Yeah, he is. But for SimWorld Hoops purposes, what we want to do is kind of shed some light on some of these alumni that have moved on. Again, we're not focusing on G League. We're not focusing on the international scene. But there's some legitimate talents here that are alumni of SimWorld Hoops that we'll need to make sure that we keep an eye on. UCLA, like we said, Jalen Snow, Legero Carroll. Snow entered the last season as the number 1 recruit, along with Shea King. These were guys many expected to be dominant. Jalen Snow kind of flirted with being dominant, but he never had the moments like a different certain player. And I'm going to let your mind go who you want to go to first on that one. But he never really had that moment. He kind of had a Caden Shipp type season. Last year, Caden Shipp oozes potential. Hot start for Oakland. They make the first championship game. Jalen Snow, but Caden Shipp never really proved to be more, and he's flashed that potential now for Bay Area, but he didn't really have that. It was always kind of wanting. Jalen Snow was the same type of way. Incredible talent. He could hoop with the best of them. His offensive repertoire was matched, but only matched by the most elite players in the league, but he wasn't able to ever string those games together. He always had complete games, but he didn't have completely dominant games. He's joined by Legero Carroll. Carroll, not personality-wise, but play-style-wise, is the junior version of a Klay Thompson. Great on-ball defender, deadly three-point shooter, but not great as an individual creator for himself and very reliant on having other guys get the ball going. I think that's why UCLA is going to be a really interesting team to watch. Add into that J.J. Ortega, who went from Los Angeles Stars, obviously now Showtime. He goes to UCLA as well. But those are two teams and a team overall that will need to be taken very seriously. The second one is Kentucky. Obviously, Kentucky routinely churns out elite talents. Well, now they're bringing in Jamison Johnson, and they're bringing in Glory Tate. Two guys that dominated. Jamison Johnson more so than Glory Tate dominated for their individual teams, but were on rosters that were severely flawed in many instances. They didn't have a lot of supporting cast, so these guys ended up having to be the one and only point of attack and the anchor of the defense. You could watch St. Louis, obviously now beyond the arc, play, and Glory Tate, they'd draw even, they'd take leads when Tate was on the floor, and those leads would evaporate or those deficits would grow the moment he stepped off. It was almost... it was extremely predictable and almost to a T how often that would happen. Now those two are going to team up in Kentucky, a team that's already loaded with talent. But they're two guys that are going to be serious contenders for potential, top 10 big board type of talents. Jamison Johnson, I would say more so than Glory Tate, but this is also a great proving ground for each of them to say, I can operate alone. I can't necessarily win alone, but let's be honest, basketball is not a one-man operating game. Now I can show my skill set surrounded by other talents. Next team to watch is Alabama. Alabama has had this really unique rise from relative unknown in the college basketball world to being a legitimate star and a legitimate title contender. And they added from a SimWorld Hoops alumni, DJ Childs. Childs was one of the best two-way guards in SimWorld Hoops last year. Incredibly efficient defender and a reliable scorer. Very Paul George-ish in a guard. Now, pre-Los Angeles Clippers, we load manage and we don't play back-to-backs, even if we only played 13 minutes in the first game. Paul George. Really great defender. Offensively is very, very talented. Childs, of course, was the number one guy on a national champion in SimWorld Hoops last year. He's got game, and he's going to bring it to Alabama with a team that's already on the rise. Expect him to be extremely efficient there, and expect him to put up some big numbers. Is he going to be the number one guy out of this class? There's too many big names, in my opinion, that prevent him from doing that, but could he be the third or the fourth? Absolutely. We're going to shift to who could be, and I'm saving a couple folks for the end, but Penn State signed Steven Johnson Odom, SJO, who really rocketed up the recruit rankings last year out of New York City, obviously now Gotham 5. Penn State is not necessarily ever going to be considered a team that should be a legitimate contender for a championship, Big Ten or otherwise. SJO changes that quite a bit. He was an incredibly efficient offensive player in specific scenarios. He obviously at Gotham 5, previously New York Stars, was surrounded by Shea King, Jai Edge, Chance Milton-Jones, who's in Richmond. These were guys that just were stacked with talent, and so by the time the ball shifted to SJO, was often in very advantageous situations. On the other end, though, he was an incredibly defensive center, an incredibly talented defensive center. I would expect him to be able to transfer that to Penn State. Now, the question is, can he be the guy on an offense? Can he be the offensive guy on an otherwise struggling team? That's kind of still TBD, but we're going to hear a lot more about that potential for him at Penn State, or we're going to see a lot more of that. Next up is Virginia, Johnny Baldwin. Johnny Baldwin had some massive games towards the end of the season, but the biggest issue for Johnny was that at the beginning of the season, he just didn't have a coaching staff around him that was capable of putting him in the right position. As soon as Coach Dodge took over, that completely changed. The script was rewritten as ball game Baldwin, Johnny ball game, absolutely dominant. I think it was a 43-point outburst, offensive dynamo. I'd expect to see more of that at Virginia. And it's obvious that he's a player that operates best in a well-coached environment, and he's going to get that at Virginia. Two more names. First one up is Roderick Little, who heads to Duke. Duke, kind of in this post-Coach K era swoon, kind of feels like they're trending downwards. But Roderick Little is a incredibly adept offensive player. First team all-defense for SimWorld last year, I guess, Team A. He's got a lot of Michael Kidd-Gilchrist to him. Question marks about his offensive game, but he's got the build that you think, hey, maybe he's there. Now, I'm not saying he ends up as that perpetual, always the potential of MGK, but never the actuality of MGK. Kidd-Gilchrist was still, or let's see, Michael Kidd, so MKG, I apologize. Yeah, we're doing it on live. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist never really exploded offensively, but what he did do was always consistently be a reliable defender. The problem with Kidd-Gilchrist is that as he was entering the NBA, the league completely shifted from guys like Tony Allen, who could survive in the league, if not thrive in the league, to going in the opposite direction where you'd rather have guys like Pat Connaughton, who's fine defensively, but he's not really all that good, where you bring him in is because he's a three-point shooter. There's plenty of guys like Pat Connaughton. It's just the first name that comes to mind. Damian Lee is the same exact way. He's going to get cooked on defense, but offensively he's going to shoot 40% from beyond the arc, and if you've got two guards that can get him the ball open beyond the arc, then he's going to be in the league for multiple years. You put Michael Kidd-Gilchrist in the league 4 or 5 years before, and he's got a long career. Roderick Little has the potential for that to be the floor, but I think he's got more of an offensive ability that it's going to last a little bit longer. And then the last name, it's Cooper Kingy-Cross, who goes to Maryland, and I hesitate to make this comparison, but I think it's worthy of being made. But to Len Bias as a guard, Cooper Kingy-Cross was absolutely incredible for Run DMV last season in Coach Myron Murray. Offensively, he rivaled the best of the best in the league. Trey Turner can walk in as the number one recruit this year, but it was still a stone's throw away from Cooper Kingy-Cross. He enters in with probably not a legitimate chance to DC Victor Wembanyama as the number one recruit. I think he's got an opportunity to maybe challenge Scoot Henderson for number 2, but the fact that you put him in that category says all you need to know about Cooper Kingy-Cross. The Terrapins could be that type of team that are powered by this offensively brilliant guard. The question's going to be, can he operate within an offensive system, and can he operate in a system that gets others involved? The good news is Maryland is starved for talent, so there's going to be a lot of possessions that are going through Cooper Kingy-Cross. The bad news is that's kind of all we've ever seen from him. We haven't been able to see what is he capable of doing in an environment that has other talented players around. The Terrapins might not win a national championship because of that, but they're going to be an exciting watch regardless. We're obviously a little more than a month away from the start of SimWorld Hoop season. The college basketball season will begin in that same time frame. We'll keep you updated, but this was a long-winded introduction to some of the players we'll need to keep an eye on as training camp begins for college hoops in SimWorld. We'll see you Thursday.